Hello folks, and welcome to Telling Tinder Tales, the show where people get to tell their interesting dating stories with me, Chris O'Neill.
And me, Thomasin Lockwood. We have 3 guests on today's episode, calling in from various locations. We have Gabby, Rosy, and Adam.
Would everyone like to say hello?
Hello.
Perfectly orchestrated, yeah. Lovely. Hope the rest of the show goes as well.
There was a harmony in that. Good job.
Excellent. Coming up on today's show.
I've never been relieved to find out that someone was just being racist. You know, but that time, that time I was.
I'm gonna just search for hunks and I'm gonna turn them into pieces of meat because why not, you know?
It also set the bench low, you know, and there's been plenty of fuck-ups since then.
We're going to start with Gabby. Gabby, whenever you're ready, tell us where you're calling from, and then the floor is yours to tell your Tinder tale.
I am calling from London, Bermondsey, and this Tinder tale, it's not the worst date I've ever been on, but it was the worst second date I've ever been on. You know, I feel like usually the first one will go badly enough that there is no second date. But this one, it was kind of weird because the first date was amazing, right? We had a beautiful time. We went to the pub. But for context, this was during COVID. So there were lockdowns and stuff. So then there was a lockdown and not a lot of date ideas. So I was like, oh, I'd like to see you again. We should meet up again. And she recommended that for our second date, we go to a Black Lives Matter protest. Now, for reference, like the people listening to the podcast, you know, you can't see, I am black-ish, and she was not. So I don't know, it's a bit of a weird dynamic. Then it got a lot worse though, because this happened in Cambridge as well. For reference, that's quite important to the story because we
Say what you're gonna say.
Well, I wanted to go. I didn't want to protest on an empty stomach, you know. So I stopped at KFC, and they had a really good deal going. You know, it was like 12 pieces of chicken for a ridiculously cheap price. So I got this big bucket of chicken, and I thought she'd be thrilled. You know, I thought I'd show up with this chicken, and she'd be like, "Oh, cool, he's got chicken. I can have some chicken," and I'd share it with her. You know, so I got 12 pieces. She wasn't hungry. I only had a couple pieces, so now I had this big 10-piece bucket of chicken. And we showed up, and we went to the park, and we were looking for the protest, and I couldn't find the protest. You know, I didn't see any Black Lives Matter protest. There was just like this handful of white people in the corner of the park. And then I saw they were holding signs, and I realized that was the protest. There were no black people at the Black Lives Matter protest. Fucking Cambridge, man. I can't. But you know, I showed up, and bear in mind, they were all, you know, it was white people in Cambridge. They were very organized. They had signs. I was the only person there without a sign. I was also the only person there with a big bucket of fried chicken. You know, which is not, you know, it's not a good look when you show up. So. Anyway, the march gets going, right? It starts, and we start walking, and I was wrong. You know, I didn't see it at first. I thought there were no other black people there. There was one, the photographer. The only black person there was the photographer, and that was quite the conundrum, right? Because obviously he's gonna want to, you know, he's gonna want to get some photos of diversity, but there was nothing to show, you know. So apart from taking a selfie, I was his only option. But the trouble is, I didn't want anybody to find out I'd gone to this thing. So I took the bucket of chicken and I held it on top of my head as I was walking, partly because it was heavy, you know, it was 10 pieces of chicken and it was a long march. But I put it on top of my head. And the issue is, like, I could just see the guy, like, it was, you know, the black photographer, he was just looking at me and he was, like, begging with his eyes for me to put the chicken down. But I couldn't because I didn't want to end up on their Facebook page. So I held it up there, and then I realized as I was doing it, it was even worse because I looked like an Ethiopian woman carrying water to her. It was fucking a KFC. It was there was no third date. That was. I wish there was like an epic conclusion to this story, but it just sort of there was no coming back from that. You know.
Oh my gosh. That was great. That was God. Well. That wasn't great. That was awful. But that was a great story, Gabby. Thank you. Wow. Well, I wonder how it looked for people watching you all walk out of context, like just seeing this man parading this KFC and like people like straggling back. The photographers taking photos. They'd be like, "Oh, they're holding a parade for KFC." Like, that guy really loves KFC.
Next level advertising.
Yeah. My question is, roughly, can you like give us a ballpark of how many people were there? Because I wonder how many people makes a march. When you're like, we started marching, I'm like, well, when do you go from cobbling and strolling to marching?
Yeah, I see. When it started, it definitely wasn't enough to feel like a march. At the start, like 7 people, I would say, which I wouldn't call that a march, really. Pathetic numbers from Cambridge. But by the end, like another 5-ish, like another, yeah, exactly. Like another 5-ish people joined by the end. And then, then it felt like, a dozen people. That's a small march.
We nearly doubled our numbers.
Two, which, actually 2 out of 12. Yeah, exactly. But 2 out of 12 being black, actually, that's not so, it's not so bad.
Okay, I have more questions, but I will open the floor now. Chris, do you have any for Gabby?
Yeah. I'm just baffled as to who organized the protest, in that I would have thought that maybe I've got this wrong, but that the lead would be taken by people who identify as black. I mean, I've never seen a gay rights pride parade organized by people who were overtly straight. It just seems odd to me. Do you have any idea?
Oh, I completely agree. But see, like, I thought there would be black people there, because it was the Black Lives Matter march. But the thing is, it was, I forgot it was Cambridge, and I don't know where I thought they were going to come from. Like they were just, like they just spawned to go to the march. I don't
Black
know.
Lives Matter, but not enough to let them come to university.
Precisely.
Yeah. You say, is it that you didn't contact her or she didn't contact you on the third date situation?
I left some. So I left some details out of this. But,
now we're getting to the beef. Go on.
Okay. So at the end of it, right, after the march, I didn't disgrace my entire peoples, for nothing. So we hooked up, and she did. It was safe. I was responsible. She did get in contact like about a week later. Neither of us contacted each other, so it didn't go that well. But she gets in contact and tells me that her doctor, she was speaking to her doctor and said that she'd slept with a man from the Bahamas, which is where I'm from. And she said that her doctor said, "Oh no, there's a lot of AIDS in the Bahamas. You need to be," and warned her, and then asked her, like, so she basically got in contact, because she messaged me out of the blue, just like, "When did you last get tested?" And I was like, "Oh God."
Oh no.
I was like, "Oh God, what has she given me?" And then when I found that, I've never been relieved to find out that someone was just being racist, but that time, that time I was.
You left out the good bit.
I would prefer that.
That's what I was just thinking. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, I don't know who's at this table. I don't know.
Goodness.
But the same woman went on a Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing. And that really tainted. Before, it was a beautiful time at the protest.
Yeah.
A beautiful time.
Thank you so much for
really
organising that for me.
Things, yes. Thank you. But no, it changed it. It changed my perspective because, after that, it felt like she'd only invited me to be like, "Look, everyone, I brought one."
I got one.
Captured one in the wild. I'm sort of thinking.
Oh, it's a big one.
Okay. There must be questions.
Yes. Should we start with Adam? Do you have any questions?
You said that you picked up some chicken before the date like it was the most natural thing in the world. Is that normally part of your dating pattern?
Not much. It's just a day in the life for me, to be honest. I don't know. It's during COVID, it was completely my routine. It's still my routine, but it's I didn't really want to say that on.
Times is hard. Times were hard.
I don't go anywhere without my chicken.
Right.
And Rosy, do you have any questions for Gabby?
Yeah, well, I was wondering, what with it being Cambridge and all, and given that the photographer was kind of invisible because of being on the other side of the camera, did all the people with placards change their signs to Black Life Matter?
I don't have anything clever enough to.
Because then you could have felt quite special. You really could have reveled in your status there.
Yeah. No, they should have. If I had a Sharpie or something, maybe I would have gotten in there.
You could have used a bit of chicken, like greased around it, and then just cut the letter out. For next time, though. For next time.
I'm not sure he's going to be invited back on that particular protest. Worse, I don't think he'd go.
I don't think so.
That's been, Gabby, that was fascinating and worrying all at once. Rosy, where are you calling in from, and do you have a story for us?
I am calling in from Hebden Bridge in West Yorkshire, although I usually live in Brighton, but I'm up here more and more because it's so nice. And yeah, I do have a story. I was thinking about Tinder dates and online dating, and I very rarely go on it. I did actually. I was spurred on to spend 2 days on Bumble last week. It's so overwhelming. I keep swiping and swiping, thinking at some point I'll get through all the men, but I just never did. Turned out I'd set my thing to 30-mile radius, so that had Manchester and Leeds in it, so it had quite a few. But in the past, the first time I ever went onto Tinder, and the only time, was in 2014, where I'd just newly rekindled my childhood love of muscle-bound, oiled-up hunks. And so I thought, do you know what? Fuck it. I've gone out with some really weird-looking guys. I was proudly saying, I don't care what height you are. I used to go out with a guy who was 7 inches shorter than me, 20 years older, with a tattoo on his dick that he did himself in prison. Don't pick up a guy in a treatment centre. That's my feedback. But this time I thought, no, I am going to go in pure objectification. I am going to just search for hunks, and I'm going to turn them into pieces of meat, because why not, And I tried. I searched. I didn't get proper bodybuilders, but I searched for, the kind of roid heads at the local gym. I wanted rough and ready hot pots. I just couldn't objectify them. I would say things like, I was setting things up and they weren't going for it. I would just be like, so tell me about the, the agony of a lactic acid buildup. I want to hear all about it. And they're like, no, babes, I haven't been to the gym today. It's a rest day. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, how about when you're on stage? I've been to amateur bodybuilding competitions. They're so wonderful. It's fake tan dripping, and there's agonized people. It's how is it if you're on stage, and you lose, and you must feel so humiliating, right? And he's like, no, babes, I don't compete myself. This is all different people. I move on to all these other things, and meanwhile they're trying to objectify me. It just doesn't work. So I gave up. I had to give up, and I'd narrowed it down. Even in my description, I said I'm only looking for bodybuilders with good oral hygiene, which I had to add after this chin guy. Not only did he take all the skin off my chin, but had a viscousy film over his teeth, which was really not becoming. I've actually got a date coming up on Saturday with this guy that I met, although I had to tell him earlier on that it was not appropriate to send images of me giving him a hand job, but as a metaphor of someone cutting down a tree.
Hold on. There's
a lot in there.
I know, it's a lot. I mean, I was shocked as well. I was shocked. he still hasn't replied to the text I sent. So we might not meet up on Saturday. In a way, I hope not, because imagine if it all goes well and then he's like the future love of my life and then he's like, oh, let me listen to that podcast. That's the sad story, really. I mean, sure, we might turn it all around with this young man on Saturday, but it's impossible to objectify men who literally turn themselves into objects for fun. Or maybe that's not why they do it. Never thought about that. And Tinder makes me have anxiety attacks and I just have to delete it straight away. The end.
Love ending on an anxiety attack. Love it. We've ended on racism. We've ended on anxiety attacks. We've had tattoos on dicks. I have so many questions. I will leave Chris to start, though.
Okay, the first question I have, I suppose, is about the dick tattoo, right? That has to be the most important question. First of all, he did it himself. Secondly, he was in prison. What was the state of the member while it was being tattooed? Because that would influence the scale and nature of the image. So first of all, he did it himself, right? And what was the image? What was he in prison for?
Well, he went to prison for lots of things. He was in prison for a total of 19 and a half years. So in that sense, we were the same age, I suppose, given that he was 20 years older. So he had the tattoo for a very long time before I met him. He probably had more teeth at that time when he did the tattoo. And it was of a simple, smiley face, simple, direct, elegant, 2 dots and a semicircle.
Wow. I think if I was in prison for that long, I'd also be like, fuck it. Like,
I mean, don't take me wrong. He had other tattoos as well that he had done himself, but that was the only one on his dick.
Right.
And there was plenty of room for more, I can tell you that much.
Right. Okay.
Do you think he intended it to start it out like some kind of self-portrait? But he was like, oh, this is going to be too painful, smiley face.
Do you know, that's a bloody good question. If only... Well, no, I'm glad I'm not still in touch with him, to be fair. But if I was, I'd call him up and ask him. But alas.
Yeah. Like, what was the vision?
He wasn't a good artist, so it could have been.
I see.
My question for you is, when did this love for muscled up, oiled down hunks, as you described them, when did that start?
It started when I was 6 years old and watched...
He-Man. I knew you were going to say that!
Do you love it as well?
So for me, He-Man is actually very queer-coded.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it, is that kind of insane homoeroticism of him being tortured.
Yeah, like...
I could watch it all day and sometimes have. Not just that, I've made a montage of all my favourite torture clips. Lucy's seen it quite a few times.
Lucy is our producer, who is currently sitting in the background pretending none of this is happening. Lovely. Oh my goodness. The way you talk, Rosie, I love it. It's like we're all just specimens. We're a petri dish for you.
Well, but you know what? That's what He-Man like sells a false dream, doesn't he? Because that we grow up with He-Man and we think, oh, muscle men must love to like wax themselves, get naked and be totally objectified. But it turns out that the ones you find down the local gym, not so keen.
They keep running from me.
Mind you, the advantage of them being so muscle-bound is they probably can't run very fast.
No, and they sink like a stone in water, I think, from what I've heard.
I'm glad you're relying on stories rather than having checked it yourself.
I love it. It's giving Hello Clarice. Like, I'm loving Rosie's energy. Gabby, do you have any questions for her?
To be honest, I wish the tattooed penis thing was at the end. Because I got quite, I just got completely fixated on that, I was listening, but I was,
you had to get tattooed penis.
My life was the peak of my existence.
That's where I stopped listening.
I didn't even mean to mention the tattooed penis. No, it just popped into my mind.
On that, right? I have a question. Was the fact that he did the tattoo himself, was that a green flag or a red flag for you? Because I feel like that's showing initiative. I could see it going either way.
I think that for me, it was a green flag among a sea of red. That was probably the best thing about him.
Oh! It gets worse from there.
Believe me, yeah.
Rosie, we are getting you back on.
We have a saying in the live show in particular that nobody leaves needing therapy that didn't arrive needing therapy. I'm not sure the rest of us won't need therapy after this.
Well, I'm not a trained counsellor, but I do have counselling skills, so, we can set up a meeting afterwards.
I'd be afraid to,
Lovely,
frankly.
thank you. And Adam, do you have any questions for Rosie?
I mean, I sort of got stuck on the dick tattoo a bit as well. I mean, I love the fact that there was more room on there than just the face, and the idea of him doing an entire stick man seemed...
Is he playing Hangman?
I was also interested in Chin Man. Was Chin Man just, there was so much stubble that it was completely abrasive?
Well, he had the viscous film on the teeth as well, so that was the main thing with him.
Worrying, that's what that was. That was worrying.
That was very informative. I think that's the theme of today's podcast, worrying. Well, with that, let's bring it on to our third guest. Adam, whenever you're ready, tell us where you're calling from and tell us your Tinder tale.
So I'm calling from Lymington on the south coast. And my tale goes back a little while. I went to a festival called the Secret Garden Party and met a girl there, and nothing happened, but we ended up spending most of the festival together, and I think we'd sort of found a bit of a kindred party spirit, and we kept in touch afterwards and went to a couple of parties together. And then she invited me down to her place for a house party. And by that time, I was definitely interested, so it kind of felt like a big moment. So I went down and I spent the day with her and her mates and managed to avoid making a tit of myself, so that was kind of the first hurdle over. And then it was the house party, and it got pretty messy, lots of tunes, lots of dancing. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, I decided to go and make a cup of tea. So I went into the kitchen, I put the kettle on, and then came back to dance and sort of quickly forgot about the tea. And after about 20 minutes, I could hear something over the beats that sounded like an alarm. And I looked over to the kitchen, and there was thick black smoke, which was kind of billowing into the hallway. So I staggered in there and sort of waded through the smoke to try and work out what was going on. And basically what had happened was, in my slightly mangled state, I'd filled up the electric kettle and then put it on the gas hob and turned it on.
Shit.
And I got no idea what possessed me. I've never had a hob kettle before. So anyway, it was party over, neighbours woken, kettle destroyed, kitchen was covered in like horrible black gunk. Fortunately, everybody thought it was hilarious, and the next day, when I got back home, I sent her a bunch of flowers and a beautiful steam kettle with an apology note.
Very nicely done.
And it all turned out all right in the end.
Oh, thank you. Well, that was quite a more optimistic ending. Lovely. My first question is, what is a secret garden party, and what's the secret?
That's a good question. What the secret was? Well, I think initially it was quite secret, but it was a festival in Cambridge again. It was very white.
Made it secret.
I'm on mute, so it's going to sound like all the white people are laughing without me.
Oh my gosh. Gabby's crying.
Okay, you said you sent her a kettle, which was very appropriate, and flowers, and you said it all worked out okay after that. Did you ever see her again?
We're still together. 3 kids. 20 years together, so turns out that it's all right to go and melt somebody's kettle.
Oh, that's the key. Ladies,
Yeah, that's happy ending.
Sounds like a euphemism. Let's go melt the kettle.
You never melt my kettle anymore.
Plug it in and switch it on, baby.
Well, no, congratulations. I have to say that the flowers and the kettle, that was, you showed your vulnerable side with the fucking up and the fire alarm, but you showed I may bring problems, but I bring solutions.
Yeah. It also set the bench low, and there's been plenty of fuck ups since then.
You're like, it won't get better.
Yeah.
I would ask, what type of kettle do you have now?
We have an electric kettle, but I've not been in the same state to quite do the same thing over recent years, I think.
Good.
Child safety lock on
Exactly.
it now.
Excellent.
Rosie, do you have any questions for Adam?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to hear that you are together happily, because I was wondering about that too when you said about it all being all right in the end. So I suppose, a question one is, do you every sort of anniversary melt a new kettle? And two, it's sort of like you're practicing for if you get dementia. and you know that she's all right with it. So now you're like... That's what I call a solid relationship. You get that shit out of the way early. And then, was it a test, I guess is what I'm asking? Were you testing her and she passed?
Yeah, I think in some ways I might have been.
There's nothing like the air being thick with the smell of burning plastic to say, I love you.
Oh, that's amore. Gabby.
Was that the last big accident you two went through together, or were the children on purpose?
So, I mean, our first child arrived very quickly. Fortunately, everything worked out. It was pretty quick. I wouldn't like to say accident, but it was pretty quick.
Great stuff.
That was some stories. Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to start saying goodbye.
It is indeed, yes.
Just before we do that, though, just very quickly, if you have anything to plug or any last thoughts, Gabby?
I do stand-up comedy. You can follow me on Instagram at Lord Larry Lopez.
Excellent, his alter ego. And then Rosie?
I don't do stand-up comedy, but I do lots of other performance type stuff, and I also am on Instagram at Rosy Carrick. That's ROSY, like rosy cheeks.
Very good.
Lovely. And finally, Adam.
I don't have anything.
I've got nothing.
He burned it all.
Any last thoughts?
That was great. Really enjoyable.
Excellent.
Well, listen, thank you very much for listening today. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do give us a follow and give us a review. Reviews really make a difference to getting us seen on the platform you're listening to us on. If you loved us, give us 5 stars and I will melt your kettle as thanks. If you give us 0 stars, I will send you to an all-white Black Lives Matter protest. So, or give you a very horrible tattoo while you're asleep. So beware.
Don't forget, we do live shows. If you see Telling Tinder Tales somewhere, do come along and you'll get to tell your story. Thank you very much, and thank you again to all our guests. Folks, would you like to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Bye.
Godspeed.
Bye.
Y'all take it easy.
Godspeed. Telling Tinder Tales is hosted and produced by me, Chris O'Neill, and Thomasin Lockwood. Produced and edited by Lucy Regan, with music by Kinkas Moreira. It's a Jesters Comedy Dublin production and is no way affiliated with or endorsed by Tinder. If you have a story to tell, please get in touch. Details are in the show notes. And if you like us, instead of swiping right, follow us on Instagram and or TikTok at Telling Tinder Tales.